As we get going with our presentation, some of you might be the first time joining us for a webinar. So want to make sure that we go over a few webinar basics. You should be able to hear the audio. If you have any problems hearing the audio as we go through the presentation, you can submit something through the little question and answer box that you have and let us know if you have any problems. Also, if you're having difficulty listening through your computer, you can try calling in on the GoToWebinar toolbar. Or, on the GoToWebinar toolbar, you should be able to see the instructions for calling in and listening on the phone, so you can listen to the phone conference as well. All right, just 1 second. I'm going to send a little message to my partner here. As we're going through the presentation, if you have any questions, you can submit those as well through the Q&A toolbox there on GoToWebinar. We'll answer some of those questions as we're going through the presentation. We do have some of our support people with us today who can help answer those questions. But also at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about some of those questions that aren't answered as well, if we can answer the question. Now, some of your questions might be very specific, and we may have to have you contact our support department directly to answer those. But you can go ahead and submit it, and we'll direct you in the best way to get the answer you need. And also, just a reminder from our friends in the legal department that the information we're providing today is for educational and informational purposes. We're not making any investment recommendations, financial, tax, or legal advice. So consider the information that we present along with your particular situation. You may need to consult with a tax advisor to discuss some of the situations that apply specifically to you. All right, so now we can get into our presentation. Today we're going to be talking about TradeLog and 2013 tax reporting. We're planning to keep this a fairly quick webinar. We're not going to go into extensive detail on using TradeLog because a lot of you that are with us have used TradeLog in the past. What we're going to talk about is particularly what's new for 2013. We'll talk about what's new as far as reporting for Schedule D and Form 8949, and we'll talk about what's new in TradeLog, and we'll also talk about some new resources that we have available online as well. So to get started, we'll talk about what's new for 2013 tax reporting. And one of the biggest things that's new for 2013 is just, I shouldn't say the biggest, it is the biggest, but it's a very simple thing really. With the Form 8949, there's some changes that the IRS made just a few weeks ago that has to do with labeling. And you'll see here on the screen right now, we're showing Part 1 of the 8949. Looks very much like the 2012 8949. There's 3 check boxes, A, B, and C. These relate to your 1099-B, whether cost basis was reported, not reported, or whether the security was reported at all on the 1099-B. Now, I'm going to mention this. As far as 1099-B reporting goes, there's really nothing new this year with the 1099-B compared to last year. So your 1099 that you received this year very likely is going to look very much like the 1099-B that you received for 2012 from your brokers. There's no major changes. Next year is a whole nother story because they are going into another phase of the 1099-B reporting. These phases last until 2016 now, that the IRS is gradually implementing some of the requirements for brokers. So for the most part, especially if you used TradeLog last year, a lot of things you'll expect to see are very much the same. Now, when it comes to these check boxes, what's changed this year is on Part 2 of the 8949, which is the part where we report long-term transactions. You'll notice instead of having the labels A, B, and C that they had in the last couple of years, the IRS now has changed the long-term section to D, E, and F. So there are now 6 different sections of the 8949, A, B, C, D, E, and F. Really, what categorizes a security on one section or another hasn't changed. It's just a label. That's really all that's different is the labeling. So that is reflected in TradeLog. As you'll see later, we talk about the forms. We've reflected those new labels. Another note I will mention, this was a last-minute change that happened just about midway through January by the IRS. So your broker's 1099-B may not reference this change. It may not reflect it because a lot of the brokers have already started the whole process. This is a very major process for them to generate 1099-B. So on your 1099-B, if it may refer to Part 2, Section A instead of Part 2, Section D. You might see some of those little nuances with the reporting. And so in some of our online documentation, we've tried to account for that and remind you that it could be labeled either way. So not a huge change, but that's really the biggest change you're going to see with the Form 8949 from the IRS this year. Now, another change has to do with Schedule D. And we want to touch on this one for a minute because it can be very misleading. The IRS added 2 lines to the Schedule D, line 1A and line 8A. And you'll see, as we're showing on the screen right now, basically these lines say that you can report the totals from what was reported on the 1099-B if the basis was reported to the IRS and you have no adjustments. And you would not have to use the 8949, just simply use the totals from the 1099-B. You don't even have to include the 1099-B. This can be misleading though. In fact, we've even seen at least one of the most popular tax software programs who have failed to fully explain these instructions. Some will say if you receive the 1099-B and it has cost basis, you don't need to use the 8949. You can simply enter the totals here. That is not correct. Notice it says for which you have no adjustments, and it refers you to the instructions. So if we go to the instructions for Schedule D for lines 1A and 8A, you'll notice there are 2 requirements. If you're going to use those lines and basically just report your totals, the first requirement, it says the 1099-B would have to show the cost basis and does not show a non-deductible wash sale loss in box 5. So in other words, when you look at your 1099-B, if your broker made even one wash sale adjustment on that 1099-B, you cannot use lines 1A and 8A. In addition, the second requirement is that you do not need to make any adjustments to the basis or type of gain or loss, and it refers you to the 8949 instructions. So if you've been around TradeLog much at all, we've been talking about this along with our partners at Green Trader Tax for several years now. There are different reporting rules for taxpayers than there are for brokers. So even if your broker did not make any wash sale adjustments, there may be additional adjustments that you are required to make, such as if you traded stocks and options on the same security, if you had multiple accounts that you traded the security in, if you had IRA accounts. You can get the whole list on our website. We talk about the different rules. So if you have to make any additional adjustments for wash sales or for any other reason, you cannot use lines 1A and 8A on the Schedule D. Think about it this way. These lines on the Schedule D are for those people that maybe sold some stock they've been holding forever and ever, or that they inherited. They maybe had 1 or 2 transactions the entire year. Wash sales don't even come into play. It's very straightforward. The broker put it on the 1099-B. That's all they have to do. So the IRS is making it easy for those people. But for most of you who are active traders and investors, you have wash sales, you have other adjustments. You cannot use lines 1A and 8A. And be very leery if you're getting advice from someone that says you can, because you need to make sure and check out these instructions, because we're seeing a lot of bad advice that's going on out there about this topic. So we wanted to mention that just so that you are aware. It is something new you'll see on the Schedule D, but usually you do not use lines 1A and 8A. So let's talk about what's new in TradeLog version 13. And as most of you know, we released version 13 last week of TradeLog. Our version numbers now correspond with tax years. So version 13 means that you can use that version for 2013 tax filing. We have these updates we've talked about in the software so you can see the finalized reporting. If you need to use TradeLog for your previous year taxes, 2012, 2011, you can do that in version 13 as well. It includes previous tax year versions, but version 13 is what you need to have if you want to finish 2013. So if you have not yet updated, you need to do so. Usually when you open TradeLog, it'll prompt you right away. If there's an update, just follow the on-screen instructions. As long as you have an active TradeLog subscription, that update is free. You always get those free updates. And throughout the tax season, we'll have other small updates and adjustments to account for any minor changes, any bugs that might come up with the software interacting with Windows, things like that. So always keep your software up to date. Now I'm going to do a little demonstration. I'm going to open up TradeLog and talk about some of the key changes, some of the features in the software this year. Excuse me. So one of the first things I want to talk about, I have just a very, very simple account here. One of the steps in using TradeLog each year is reconciling with your broker 1099B. So if you have a taxable account, that's a step that you have to complete as you're following the instructions. So I'm going to go and open up the Reconcile 1099 process. And in here, it looks very, very similar to what we used last year in the software. We ask you to enter your gross proceeds. We ask you to enter your totals for reported cost basis for short-term and long-term. And then there's some details about the 1099B. For 99% of our users, there's no need to change any of these checkboxes. We've already checked things based on default settings. The only thing that you might have to look at is if you did have options trades, if you had any options that were exercised and assigned, if your broker adjusted the corresponding stock for option premiums, you may need to check this box. So that is one of the only areas you really need to look at. Now, if any of you are options traders, I'm just going to highlight this right now as well. There is the second checkbox, which is for options, and this one sometimes throws people for a loop, and they think, oh yeah, I trade options, I'm going to check that. Just because you trade options does not mean you check that box. We don't know of any brokers that are reporting options on the 1099B, the part that goes to the IRS. Now, they may have a supplemental section with your 1099B that reports options trades, but I have not yet seen a single broker report those to the IRS. That doesn't start until next year. So we have this here just in case if someone needed to use it, though my inclination is to not have it there because it messes some people up. But just be aware of that most likely does not apply to you. You would only check that box probably if one of our support staff directed you to do so, and that would be in a rare circumstance. Now, there is one thing significantly new on the 1099 process this year, and that is this little checkbox, no 1099B. So it says, you'll notice what the box says with this. It says a broker is not required to provide a 1099B for this account. So some of you, because of your particular structure, your tax structure, like if you're using certain entity structures, you actually do not have to receive a 1099B from the broker. Or if you've elected MarktoMarket Accounting, you may not receive a 1099B from your broker. There's just various reasons why you may not be required to receive one. Now, there's the difference here. We're not talking about just because your broker hasn't yet sent it. But this is if your broker's not required to provide a 1099B. You can check that box, and you'll notice we no longer ask you anything about the 1099B. So once you click OK, that's going to go ahead and take care of the 1099B process. You won't be asked for information from your 1099B later on in the TradeLog process. So that is there. If that applies to one or more of your accounts, you can just open that up and check that box and click OK. Now I'm going to uncheck that right now because I have some information here that I want to include to show you something in the next step. And let me just go ahead and undo my changes. There we go. So now another key thing that's new in TradeLog in version 13 is when we go to the reports and we go to our Form 8949 for Schedule D. You'll notice we have a lot more options now in our Form 8949 menu for Schedule D reporting for 2013. Now, if you use TradeLog in the past couple of years, you might be familiar with the adjustment line that we included to reconcile the difference with 1099B. That's this first option, which was our default method in the last few years. We did have an option to turn that off in the past. When you ran your 8949 with the adjustment line included, you would receive an adjustment line such as this one that's showing on this page of my report, adjustment to reconcile difference with 1099B. And basically this was putting in an adjustment between the cost basis and the adjustment column, and the result would be that your total cost basis on the 8949 would match with the total cost basis reported on the 1099B for that section. So that was a method that was used the last couple of years. A lot of taxpayers last year were not including that adjustment line. It does cause some difficulty with some of the e-filing. And so this year, after consulting with CPAs that we consult with in our software, we decided to not use that method by default. If you want to include the adjustment line this year, you can still do that. You can opt to do that here in the menu. However, the default method we're using this year is a new method that involves a statement explaining differences and adjustments between Form 8949 and the 1099B. Now, you'll notice in these options there's some buttons that take you directly to our user guide to explain what this is. And so I'm going to click on the What's This button, and you'll see in our user guide we have a page that explains this statement. And basically what we're doing with this option is we're not including a cost basis adjustment line, but we're including this statement which explains the Form 8949 differences and adjustments with your 1099B. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go back, and I'm going to click Run Report, so that way I can show you what this statement looks like. It's the last page of the 8949, and here in this statement, we will include, if you choose to, we'll include your name, and if you select the box to include your Social Security number, we'll include that on this form as well. We explain at the beginning some of the reasons why the majority of taxpayers, especially active traders, cannot use the 1099B to fill out Form 8949. The IRS suggests doing that in their instructions, but it is typically not possible because of some of the challenges that face traders, especially active traders. So we explain some of the reasons why the 1099B cannot be verified because of the lack of detail, the type of information, and because of that, this is why TradeLog does not use the 1099B alone for tax reporting. Instead, we use the trade history to look at actual trade history and make the adjustments required. The next section of this statement talks about the differing wash sale rules that taxpayers are required to follow for Form 8949 versus what brokers are required to do on 1099B. If you don't know anything about this, then you'll want to pay attention later as I talk about some of our online resources. But basically, then we talk about those differing rules, and then TradeLog analyzes your accounts in your file and provides some specific situations that affect you. You'll notice there's 6 check boxes here in this statement, and we will check the situations that apply to your particular file in your accounts. For example, if you trade stocks and options, the IRS requires you to adjust wash sales between stocks and options. Your broker's not required to do that. So we check that box because that is a difference between what you have to do by law and what's reported on the 1099-B. If you have more than one taxable account, the IRS requires you to adjust wash sales across accounts. Your broker does not have to make those adjustments on the 1099-B. So that may be selected if you have that situation. If you have an IRA account, there are specific laws and rules that affect wash sales that could be triggered by a trade in your IRA. Special rules that actually permanently disallow that loss. So if any of those types of wash sales have occurred in your accounts, we're going to check that box as well. And then also there are a couple of brokers who erroneously report wash sales when it comes to short sales. Instead of adjusting the cost basis, they're adjusting the proceeds on the 1099-B. What results is there can be a discrepancy between what TradeLog reports from your actual trade history for proceeds and sales versus what the broker reported. So we may check this box if that situation applies in your accounts, if you have one of those brokers, and if you have short sales with those brokers. There's two other check boxes that could affect your situation. One is different reporting rules for short sales. And so if you have any short sales on stock in your taxable accounts, we're going to check this box, which basically tells the IRS that the rules that affect Form 8949 for taxpayers are different than those for brokers. So some of the dates that you report short sales on may be different because you're required to apply Section 1259 constructive sale treatment. Brokers do not have to apply those rules. So there's a difference as well. The last checkbox, other errors in 1099-B reporting. This is a catch-all checkbox. What we found is that some of you find other errors not related to these other situations. Maybe your broker simply failed to report something on the 1099-B, or they failed to report it correctly, and you're unable to get them to fix it. If you have a situation like that, you can check this box for other errors in order to tell the IRS about that. Now, to do so, you actually have to go in when you run the 8949. You have to check this box that appears under the option for the statement and check that there are other errors on my 1099-B. Once you check that, you'll notice now when I run this report again and I go to that last page, you'll notice that we checked that box on the statement. So now you're telling the IRS there were other errors. Finally, at the end of this statement, we explain how your Form 8949 was generated using accurate trade history that was imported from your broker, along with some reconciliation with your 1099-B. So this way, you can actually use this statement to include it and send it to the IRS if you wish, and it provides the additional information they may need if they wonder why there's differences between your 8949 and your 1099-B. This is our recommended method for 2013 tax filing, rather than including a cost basis adjustment line, which perhaps could draw undue attention to an adjustment that's not fully explained. Now we're actually giving full details, including the particular parts of the tax code that apply to you as a taxpayer, so that you can provide this to the IRS if you wish. And that is totally up to you if you want to include this statement to the IRS. They actually refer to these types of statements in their documentation. When you look at the instructions for Form 8949, the IRS asks you to include a statement if you have differences, particularly in wash sales. And so this fulfills that requirement. If you're using a CPA, such as our partners at Green Trader Tax, or you have your own CPA or tax advisor, you can also provide this statement to them. They may use this statement in itself, or they may use the text of this statement to write their own statement or similar document that they may include with your tax filing. So this is generated automatically for you using this new method. Now, another thing I'll point out, just as in past years, we do include an instruction page with your 8949, which helps you fill out your Schedule D. If you're filling out your Schedule D yourself, this tells you what your totals are for each section of the Schedule D. This can also be helpful when you're e-filing with some of the popular solutions like TurboTax and TaxAct. We're not going to go into a lot of detail with that in today's webinar. We will have a future event. We'll talk about that more. But you can use these totals more easily when you are e-filing by just using this page as an instruction page. With that being said, another point that we added to the 8949 menu, you may notice, is a checkbox to create Form 8949.pdf attachment. So what this will do when I select this and I run the report, the first thing it does is it prompts me to save a PDF. It's named Form 8949.pdf, so I can save that to my computer wherever I like to save it. You'll notice something different with the report that's generated and the PDF that is saved. We've removed the instruction page when you select this option. So now the PDF includes just the 8949 and the statement that we generated. That's all that's included. And so what that allows you to do is use that PDF to e-file directly with the IRS. Now, the IRS accepts PDF files in their modernized e-file system. However, with that being said, not all e-file solutions support attaching a PDF. For example, TurboTax and TaxAct, from what we've checked with them and found out, they do not allow you to attach a PDF of your 8949. They're just simply not set up for that because that's not what the average Joe taxpayer would use. But some of the professional solutions used, especially by CPAs, do allow you to attach a PDF. So if you are using a CPA, they might particularly be interested in getting this PDF generated directly by TradeLog that includes only the 8949 and the statement, because you don't want to send that instruction page with the Schedule D totals. That's not something you would include with this PDF file. So that's an option as well. Of course, you can generate a PDF the old method. If I go into here and run the Form 8949 without that box checked, you can still go up and save a PDF, but it will include that instruction page. So either you have to edit your PDF file with the appropriate software and remove it. Of course, you can also use the print option and print to a PDF if you have the appropriate software for that as well. So that's something that a lot of users have asked for because, especially if you're using a CPA, they may just want the PDF of your 8949, and they are able to now use that to electronically file. Basically, they just put your totals into the Schedule D on their software. So those are some of the things that are new in TradeLog. Now, let's talk for a minute about getting support with TradeLog. First and foremost, we want to remind users, and we can't say this enough every year, don't forget to follow the 8-step Quick Start Guide. And I'll show you that in the software. I'll also show it to you online in just a moment. But that Quick Start Guide includes the steps you need every year to be successful at using TradeLog. Also, we have 2 ways to request support, directly from the software and also from our website and our support center online. So first of all, I want to show you in the software how to go to our Quick Start Guide. If you want to open that within the software, go to the Help menu, click Getting Started Quickly. That's going to open up our user guide, and there's the 8 steps to getting started. Now, some get confused because they think this is just for the first time, but really this is getting started with TradeLog every tax year. So these steps you can follow through. Even if you've used TradeLog for many years, you can start at step number 1, and it's going to guide you through the process of successfully completing your tax reporting for 2013. Now, if you need help, you get stuck, you have a problem with the software, you need technical support, there's 2 ways that we encourage you to use to request support. First of all, the easiest and best way is directly from the software in the Help menu. you'll notice there is an option to send files to support. Now you have to open the TradeLog file that you're working on, and then you can choose this option. And what it's going to do is it's going to open up a dialog box. You can put in your email address and name. It should be automatically populated, but if you need to change that, you can. And what we're going to do is allow you to type the reason you're sending this request. So tell us about the problem you're having, or if you got an error, if you have something you don't understand. And once you send, what it's going to do is send your problem, and it's also going to send your data file, a copy of your data file. That way we can actually see the problem in your file, and we can give you the best instructions. Now, any information like your social security number, that is never included in your TradeLog file. That is actually encrypted and stored elsewhere in the program. So you don't have to worry about that being insecure. Also, any login information that you include is all encrypted in your TradeLog file. Your password is encrypted, so that can't be accessed by anyone. If you have questions about that, we have some information online about the security that's involved when you send your files. But by sending the file this way, it's really easy. You can do it from the software, and it goes directly to us, and we'll reply by email. Now, the other option for getting support is on our website. Here, when you go to TradeLogSoftware.com, you can go to the support page, and you'll notice on the right there's an option, an online support request. You can also find that right here in the center. So you can do very similar online, except for you got to fill in this extra information, tell us about your problem, and then again we encourage you to attach your TradeLog data file and send it to us. This can be especially helpful if you need to send something else like your 1099-B. You can attach and send that as well. Now, while I'm here, I also want to show you a few other things that are new on TradeLog.com or TradeLogSoftware.com. First of all, our resources pages is the main place we encourage you to check out. We have 4 new definitive guides where we've compiled some of the information we've had in the past about trader taxes, as well as totally new updated information. For example, I definitely encourage you to check out the section on IRS Schedule D and Form 8949, as well as the brokerage 1099-B. The Schedule D and Form 8949 is one that we've put a lot of new information to really help you understand the Schedule D, Form 8949, how to complete it accurately, some of the challenges involved, and how the methods that are available for accurate reporting. So check this out if you have any questions about trader taxes, as well as we have a guide for wash sales and a guide for MarktoMarket Accounting and Form 4797. And of course we have some other tax topics as well. So definitely check out our resources page, because that can be an excellent source of information to help you out as you're going through preparing your trader taxes. All right, so now that brings us to the end. We got it done just a little over 30 minutes, so we appreciate those who were with us today. I'm going to kind of look through right now some of the questions that have been submitted. I know we've been answering, my partner Melina, she's been answering a lot of your questions directly, so it looks like we've gotten a lot of those answered. But give me just one moment, let's see what kind of questions we can answer for everyone. Okay, so some of the questions that some have are about if you're using an e-file solution such as TurboTax or TaxAct. Of course, you can use TradeLog to e-file. One thing you will notice in our user guide, right now with the initial release of version 13, which happened late last week, we don't have all of the instructions updated for using TurboTax and TaxAct. Those normally found under File Your Taxes, Step 8 of our Quick Start Guide, and we do talk about electronic filing, and we talk about TaxAct TurboTax. Some of the step-by-step instructions are not fully updated for 2013. Keep in mind, basically we're providing support for these software programs, and so it takes us time because we have to get their software and then basically tell you how to use it. So we're somewhat limited in what we can do with that. But one thing we want to highlight to people, and we will talk about this more in an upcoming webinar as well, but the best method that we have found in the last couple of years for using TradeLog and e-filing is using Form 8453 method. Basically, Form 8453 is a form that allows you to send additional information to the IRS. So you generate your 8949 with TradeLog, you send that to the IRS using Form 8453, and then all you have to do is put the totals from TradeLog's reporting in TurboTax and Tax Act. This is so much easier than trying to import all of the individual transactions from TradeLog into TurboTax and Tax Act. For example, with TurboTax, their limitations vary. The number of records you're allowed can vary anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500. It seems it just depends on what version you have and on other variables. They also have limitations on the total sales or gross sales you can have. If you have any adjustments, sometimes that can cause a problem. So what we found is some users will struggle. They're trying to import things. TurboTax isn't working right with the import. And then they get frustrated to find out TurboTax tells them, oh, we're sorry, but we can't handle your records. So it might be a lot easier just to use the Form 8453 method. So we really, really encourage people to consider just using that method directly. Now, unfortunately, TurboTax and Tax Act do not allow you to attach and send a PDF file. We're really hoping that they get caught up with allowing that, because we know the IRS allows PDFs to be sent electronically with the e-file, but those software companies do not yet support that. So if you use Form 8453, you may have to print out your 8949 and actually send the printed report to the IRS, but it can be a whole lot easier than some of the frustration of trying to enter in just totals. So we really recommend that solution. We'll have more information coming in the coming week about e-filing as we get those instructions updated. Another thing I'll mention on our website, in our support section, you can find the menu option here on the right for webinars. So, of course, here's today's webinar. We'll have this recording archived. You can come back and check it out later. Also, we'll have more webinars coming up. We're planning right now. We haven't set the exact date, but it'll probably be next week. We'll have a big webinar that will give a full refresher on using TradeLog from start to finish, basically to do your 2013 taxes. We'll start at step 1 of the Quick Start Guide, and we'll go all the way through to step 8, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about e-filing and some of those options. It'll be a good hour-long webinar at least, and we'll have a recording of that, so you can come back and check that out as well. So I want to make sure and mention that to people. Another question, and this has come up a lot with 1099B when it comes to mark-to-market accounting, and this is a really good question actually that someone asked. There are some variations with each broker. Basically, when you have elected mark-to-market accounting and trader status, which is really section, I just went right through, I can't remember the election, the IRS section. But when you elect that method of accounting, technically you're supposed to be able to inform your broker that you've elected mark-to-market, and they can now, thank you Arnold, section 475. So if you elect section 475F for trader status and you notify your broker of that, the IRS instructs that the broker does not have to provide you a 1099-B with all of the wash sale adjustments and such. Now, some brokers still provide a 1099-B just as a reference for you. I understand some do not provide it at all. Sometimes it can depend on your particular elections. So if you do receive a 1099-B from your broker and you've elected mark-to-market, one of the things that you'll notice in TradeLog, let's see, I'll set something up real quick here. let me switch this account over to a mark-to-market. So now when I run the 1099B process, oh, that didn't work. I have to change this account over to a mark-to-market. There we go. So when I reconcile 1099B in a account that's marked or that is identified as mark-to-market, the only thing it's going to ask for is your gross proceeds, your total sales. So if you do receive a 1099B, that's the only thing we're really looking at is the total sale proceeds, because that's the one thing that we can usually match up in TradeLog. There is an option over here for sales adjusted for option premiums, because that might affect your 1099B, so you can select that or not. As far as cost basis information, we don't ask for any of that. We don't mess with it, because again, that has to do with people who are reporting on Form 8949, and mark-to-market filing does not use that. So this is really just a step that helps ensure that TradeLog's got all of the data that your broker has. But at the same time, we do know a number of those who've elected Section 475 MTM don't receive a 1099B at all. So if that's the case, you can just check that box and you don't have to worry about that process. All right, let me look at some of the other questions we have here. And we didn't talk a whole lot about mark-to-market accounting in this particular webinar, just because a lot of the changes are with 8949. MTM users, it's just so much easier tax reporting with mark-to-market than it is Form 8949. But of course, to use mark-to-market accounting, you have to have an MTM version of TradeLog. We have a 1500 record and an unlimited record version for mark-to-market. Now, one of the little nuances that sometimes people get confused about is when we use the term mark-to-market, it can refer to a couple things. Your mark-to-market really applies to a method of accounting where your positions held open at year-end, December 31st, are marked to fair market value. So they're closed on December 31st at whatever the market price is, and they're reopened January 1st at that same price. So basically, any gains or losses are realized in that tax year. Now, of course, if you have trader status and you've elected Section 475F, you use mark-to-market. But one of the things some people get confused about is if you trade anything that is classified as a Section 1256 contract, futures as well as broad-based index options, some ETF options, those also are treated with mark-to-market accounting. So sometimes you may need an MTM version of TradeLog if you have Section 1256 contracts. Because what happens is at year end, if you're carrying those positions over, TradeLog needs to run the mark-to-market accounting. It needs to do that same accounting method for Section 1256 contracts. Now, those are not reported on Form 8949. Section 1256 contracts are actually reported on Form 6781. So that's where you report those, and we have a report that you generate specifically for that in TradeLog. So to learn more about that, I encourage you to check out online our definitive guide for mark-to-market accounting found in our resources section. Here we talk about mark-to-market accounting. We talk about it with Section 475F election. We also talk a little bit about Section 1256 contracts in here as well. And we also have some more under filing your taxes. We talk about futures because that's really Section 1256 contracts falls under futures. And so you can learn more about that there. All right. Well, we've kind of reached the end of our time period today, and I think we've answered most of our questions. If you do have further questions, of course, you could submit those to our support department online through the software, or if you have our email address, you can just reply and send us an email directly as well. We do thank you all for joining us. As mentioned, we are recording this session. We hope to have that posted online within 24 hours, and we will email you at the email address you used to register with the information so that you can replay the video if you missed anything or you want to watch anything again. And of course, stay tuned. Keep an eye on your email box, or if you follow us on social media like Facebook and Twitter, we'll be posting announcements about the upcoming webinars that we'll be having over the next several weeks as we really gear up and people start receiving their 1099-Bs. We want to help you complete accurate tax reporting using TradeLog. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and hope you have a safe and happy evening.